see all these people joining from all around the world, so that's exciting. Okay, so today's webinar, we are talking about HR recruiting, looking for the best tech talent, and one great way to do so, which is through competitive developer events, aka the hackathon. So looks like we are rolling and live. I'm here with Morgan Chumakas, who is part of the Tech for Social Good program. She's the program manager at JP Morgan Chase, and she's got extensive hands-on experience with their format of recruiting hackathons. Thanks for joining, Morgan. How are you?
Hi, thanks, Patrick. Really good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great to have you. So first, Code for Good is essentially the program name and theme behind how you create these HR and recruiting hackathons. Can you tell us a little bit about how that started and the overall theme of events that you run to recruit developers and interns?
Yeah, of course. So we actually started, this is going to sound crazy, but 10 years ago this year. So it's been our 10-year anniversary. We've been really excited about that. And we actually started really small with just running one hackathon in London, again, about 10 years ago. Since then, we've really, really grown and scaled up over the years. So now we operate in over 16 cities globally, and they differ really depending on the hiring needs and resources of each location. In some places, we run smaller hackathons. In some, like for example, in Buenos Aires, we run sometimes 50-person hackathons. Where in India, our past event was about 700 people. So we've really been able to kind of grow in different regions and grow just depending on the different needs of JP Morgan in different places, and can really scale up or down our program based on that.
Awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about the different regions? I heard India, which is awesome and totally makes sense. You run them in different locations, online and in person. Do you also have team members in those regions that are kind of assessing and working with participants in their local respective place? Is it kind of like a joint global effort?
Yeah, so that's a great question. We do run them, what we call at JP Morgan, which I imagine might be different in other organizations. We call them our tech centers. So anywhere where we have a large technology presence and senior leadership in those places is where we really look to run those hackathons. And that's always kind of growing and changing, right? So as we evolve as a company, we evolve what those tech centers might be and how much they grow or maybe stay kind of stagnant. So again, right now we're in about 16 cities. I have teammates all over the world, but we also have technology presence really all over the world. So right now we operate in different cities in India, Hong Kong, Singapore, all throughout Europe, and then in the US and Latin America.
Awesome. And you mentioned using technology. I think that's really key because it can be really tough to find people with the right proficiency backgrounds. You're talking language, what sort of courses or experience someone's had in the workplace. Tech is so nuanced and diverse in terms of what kind of experience a developer has. So do you have specific profile types in mind when you're organizing these and looking at the sign up lists? What types of typical interns or developers would you say convert on to becoming part of the JP Morgan Chase Co team?
Yeah. So I can take a step back too and just explain a little bit more about maybe my role and how we work in the larger organization as well, because I think it's kind
Sure.
of relevant. So I am on, as Patrick mentioned, on the Tech for Social Good team. We run programs again all over the world. Code for Good is just one example of a hackathon, but we broadly run programs that focus on different things like growing our workforce and really getting knowledge and experience through what we call like experiential learning. So whether that's through a hackathon or through volunteerism in another way. So that being said, we partner really closely with different people, again, in all regions and in all different, again, what we call lines of businesses. So people looking at different places of the organization where we need to add people in. So one of those examples is we work really closely with different recruiting teams to see who they're recruiting for, what profile they're looking for, and really try to cater our programs to best match what those needs are. And it's throughout technology, throughout with different tasks and technology. So Code for Good is just one example where we work strictly with people who are going to be software engineers. We also run a similar program. And again, this kind of goes back to the size and scale of how we grow. We're also starting a new program, I guess, under the same umbrella called Data for Good, where we're working a lot with data scientists, people who are looking to get into like machine learning and AI ML type fields. So we do really kind of grow and scale depending on the needs of the firm and depending on the people who want to get involved in this sort of thing. We, again, back to the recruiting team, I think that's a huge support system for us because I myself am not a recruiter. Well, I was at one point a recruiter, but I'm not currently a recruiter in this role. So it's been really, really helpful for us to have that support of the recruiting team to kind of work as partners in putting these on together and really understand, again, what they're looking for, whether it's working with, early career talent. So people who are looking for an internship or people who are going to be looking for like an entry level full-time job. That skill set and what we're looking out of the, identifying talent at these events are going to be really, really different than a recruiter who's looking to bring in lateral talent. So a little bit more experience at a couple years experience, higher level. Again, different than what a data team is looking for, bringing in someone who's in their PhD program right now. So we do kind of change things depending on the needs. And I think once you have like a solid base of basically how we run a hackathon, the things that change are, again, working with those different teams to identify and get the word out to the right people, and then changing up obviously the challenges they're going to work on during the hackathon.
That totally makes sense. And congrats for starting the data for good side. That's really exciting and a necessary next step as we enter, everybody digitizing and modernizing around data analytics, data scientists and stuff. So totally makes sense given the need, and excited to see quantum computing for good in 5 years once we get there. Now, so it seems like you're on the facilitator side, program management side. So you're working with the recruiting to say, okay, what are the needs and the different team needs and roles that we're looking for? How can I, get the word out, spread awareness, but also organize these 2-day events to really have enough activities that give me and the recruiting team insights onto who these developers are. How, are the activities organized enough so that we can supervise, have mentors engage properly, everybody gets the resources they need, so it's on a level playing field. And then you've mentioned, the challenges, which I think in Code for Good's instance really is driven by those nonprofits that you have as stakeholders in this event, which I think is so cool. Can you tell us a little bit about the nonprofit role in these hackathons?
Absolutely. So I can talk a little bit. But we love working with nonprofits. It's kind of the basis of what our whole team does. So we always start first with innovating for the social sector and what we can really do to give back to our communities at JP Morgan. But I think in a different lens, what that really helps to do is in some ways retain talent or at least draw talent into the firm is that culture of giving back and knowing once they did join the firm, if they were interested, talent in general was interested to do so, that they would have, they'd be part of that culture. They would have these opportunities to give back as a volunteer in different ways, whether it be to come back at Code for Good that they were hired from and now volunteer as a mentor, an SME, or volunteer in some of our other programs where they longer term even get to give back to some of our nonprofit partners. So it has been really interesting, I guess, like by-lens in having, in addition to giving back, also that kind of that feel-good sentiment for people coming into the firm and people staying at our firm, being able to give back some of their time, especially through COVID, when I think people have obviously felt maybe a little bit more isolated or not as able to get involved in stuff. We've seen obviously a huge uptick in volunteerism and people wanting to kind of get engaged and outside of their day-to-day work. So that's been really, really helpful. In terms of the nonprofits that we've worked with, all sorts of small local organizations, local to each of our, regions in which we run and operate. We've also worked with some like larger household names in general. So like, for example, the LeBron James Family Foundation and other, larger organizations that have a ton of resources and backing as well. So we've really hit everybody across the scale. In terms of the nonprofits, again, they're the ones putting forward these challenge statements. So in terms of identifying talent during these events, the things that they're working on where we would be able to watch them and identify who is great talent, they're working on these challenges for that nonprofits are putting forward. An example this is my favorite example. Our nonprofits come to us and the idea is that they're kind of these blue sky challenges, that they're not just like build us a website or build us a chat tool, that they're these blue sky challenges. So it's not just their development skills. We're really getting them to see like how they think, analytical thinking, how they work on a team, how they work under a stressful situation in general, and having to really ideate in a short period of time. So one of my favorite challenge statements was a nonprofit had come to us during the application process asking if we could figure out a way to make a dog talk which I know sounds probably really crazy to everybody on this call, like how on earth would technology make a dog talk? But we were so intrigued by that challenge statement, we thought we should absolutely have a hackathon about it. So that was one of my favorite challenge statements personally. Obviously, it was an organization that worked with dogs, support animals, providing medical support to different, their owners. And the way that the teens kind of approach the problem, again, in a really creative, cool way, is they actually were able to develop an application that could allow dogs to differentiate between different like shapes and certain colors to be able to then have that app like text out or speak out loud and notify another human what the next steps are for whatever medical need was possible. So again, just an example of some of the really cool challenge statements that are put forward at these events that again aren't just build a website or do something really simple. It's really in 24 hours. Here's this like crazy idea. You're going to have to work together with a team. You're going to have to probably pick up a few new technologies that you didn't know previous to this. You're going to have to figure out how to get this all done in 24 hours. And because of that, we think it's a really, really great way to identify that top talent who could bring that same kind of attitude and passion to technology to the firm.
Oh, that totally makes sense. And the other thing that I love about it, besides the versatility of challenges that you have, because like you said, you've got a stack of just applications and ideas that you can really curate and create a really custom, varied experience for any developer. On top of that, it really helps to bring positivity to the awareness that you drive around these events. And I think one of the crucial things that we try to identify when we have these recruiting type competitions or hackathons is, how can we give that positive experience that doesn't just seem like 2 days of boot camp, work for these potential employees or team members, and working with the nonprofits, I think is a great first step to creating that positive experience. Do you ever get feedback from the participants that really drives home that you're doing the job that you're hoping to do, which is associate this event and working with JP Morgan with such a positive experience for these blue sky challenges they work on?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way we kind of measure our value as a program is it's kind of twofold. So obviously we do measure what we do in kind of like a measurable number ROI type situation. But there's also some of the sentiments that are a little bit harder to put numbers on, which we absolutely also collect and sometimes obviously mean a little bit more to us. So I think broadly, one thing we do obviously is end up surveying a lot of the people who come back after to get those sentiments out, whether it's something we can measure or something they just want to tell us, like email us, etc. So I think broadly the feedback we get from the event is overall really, really positive, both in working with the nonprofits and just in general having kind of a cool, different experience. I think the best measurable example of kind of that positive experience is how quickly people accept their offers when given an offer from the event, and how then quickly they are to join the firm and then once they're here, volunteer their time back to these programs. I think in general speaks volumes to their positive experience with it. It definitely did what we intended to do, which was give everyone a really cool positive experience, teach them a little bit more about JP Morgan, and ideally have them leave thinking as a technologist, like, wow, JP Morgan is a technology company. It's not just this bank. They have all these technical roles. They have all these technical people, and they have such a cool culture where you can use your technical skills in different ways, not just in your day job. So I think we do see that a lot in what we call like our return investment would be people coming into the firm from this event. But more broadly, we also just get really positive feedback overall through email. I think people really do enjoy getting to give their skills back to nonprofits, obviously, and don't often have the opportunity to do so in an organized way. Additionally, outside of even giving back to nonprofits, the feedback we get is people, again, we put people on teams randomly. We do that on purpose. They don't come with teams of friends. And some of the feedback we get is they've made like a network and friends forever. People still talk years down the line, years later. They've just had like such a great positive experience. And then the other thing that I think is super cool, and one of the things we're the biggest advocates on hackathons on, is the learning opportunity that a hackathon presents. Some of the feedback we get, like I think one of my favorite quotes was, I've learned more in this 24 hours than I had in an entire semester of my development classes. a hackathon really provides opportunity for people to get with different people, think about technology on how it could actually apply to somebody, not just how you're learning in a classroom, but like how it could actually apply to a real world situation. And then having to, in 24 hours, think of different frameworks or languages that you might not know and how that can best serve whatever solution you and your team are building. Not everyone goes in with all the knowledge of every framework and language. And sometimes a team is using, I'm trying to think of a good example. Sometimes a team is using Django and you don't know that. And so people are going to have to do a little self-Googling and a little self-teaching. We have SMEs at the event to help them. And they come out of that event not only having given back and having had a cool experience, but also having learned something new that they can now put forward in their overall skill set. So just another shout out to how awesome hackathons are overall, even if it doesn't have this social good angle, even if it doesn't have this hiring angle, it's an awesome learning opportunity to give to people.
Totally. I could definitely see that. And I loved what you said a little bit earlier about showing people that JP Morgan, for the team is a technology company and not just a bank. And that's exactly what we're touching on when we talk about driving the brand awareness, driving positivity of the brand through HR and recruiting experiences. And like you said, learning experiences. I think that's what it's all about, whether your company is in retail, food service, or, makes cotton candy. If you've got developers and you need to hire on your development team, you need a way to tap into the developer base or current class of graduates so that they make the connection. Whereas they might not initially think that there's an opportunity there with a cool technology team. You spoke about, skills and having the SMEs kind of measure what technologies or hard or soft skills that these participants have. And I actually see a few questions coming from the participants that align with that. Mike asks, what kind of profiles or skills are you looking for through the Tech for Good program? Which we talked on a little bit, but I'd love to hear a little bit of a follow-up where Michael asked as well, when you're sourcing talent for these events, did you find it helpful to evaluate soft or those interpersonal human skills as well as the hard skills when it comes to coding and development? What does that skill assessment feel like?
Yeah, great question. So I can build a little bit. I guess I can build a little bit more on that. So I'm not personally on the sourcing team, but we do work really, really closely with our sourcing and recruiting teams depending on what they're looking to hire for. So I'd say number one, if you're in that position versus my position, that's awesome. And having that partnership with whoever is going to be putting these on is going to be really, really crucial. We do get to see both soft and technical skills. Sorry, I'll actually go back to the profile question first. So again, the profile is going to really determine on what we're hiring for. I'd say majority Code for Good, what we've been doing in the past, as we grow and scale it changes and kind of evolves, but it's mostly been really great partnered with what we at JP Morgan call our software engineer program, which is an internship and a full-time 2-year program for early career software engineers, mostly people who are going to be graduating with a software engineering degree of some sort, a CS degree of some sort. So we really look for just a broad profile of people who are going to be wanting to, exit their university and go into a software engineering career, no matter what field that would be. So we have people who are really focused on cyber security. We have people who are really focused on UX, UI, and design. And then we also have people who are just, broadly developers and not really sure what direction they want to take it in. And we kept it pretty broad, but for the sake of JP Morgan's programs, that is kept broad as you're brought in as an early career technologist. That really changes again as we work with different groups. So that changes as we work with, let's say somebody who is looking to recruit more lateral talent, like experienced talent, and does have a little bit more, more requirements on what they're looking for, whether we're, sourcing for people who work in certain frameworks or languages or have worked at certain other companies or have, just in general, a skill set in a specific technology area. We work really closely with the sourcing teams to, get the word out to those candidates. We do all sorts of things. We do kind of paid advertisements, through Google ads or through LinkedIn or Facebook. I think what we mostly find though is sometimes more of those grassroots efforts really help to source people a little more authentically. So We have recruiters obviously reaching out to people on LinkedIn. We have partnerships with different clubs and organizations, different nonprofits even that work to, make people career ready in different regions across the world. We have really close partnerships with them so that we can continue to spread the word and get the word out there. So I think that ends up being, in terms of sourcing the right people, that ends up being the right, for us, has been the right way, especially when we're entering a region where we don't have as much of a presence and don't have as much like word of mouth of getting to know what JP Morgan is. And then going back to the
Yeah.
other, sorry, I'll pause.
Oh, no, go ahead, please.
I was just going to go back to the other question. I think it was around, actually, I maybe answered both questions in kind of that overall statement. So I'll pause there.
Yeah, I think so. And the thing that's cool about your program, and how long it's run, is you've been able to build on word of mouth and grassroots success because you invested the time and the resources and the consistency year over year, region over region, so that people can come back. Or if a CS student feels like they had a chance to jump in on one early, because they were invited from a list of people that had taken an assessment, and maybe you had done some communication partnership with a program. They saw that they were on the invite list. They know that they can maybe join a different one if it comes up later. But I personally actually, when we're promoting hackathons, we look at where are developers in the social media space. And when I was looking through computer science career advice subreddit, that's when I really actually noticed that there was a lot of the grassroots response for Code for Good. I was seeing Redditors post things like, hey, I got invited this. Is it a cool opportunity? And people were like, jump on it. And there was even some follow-ups, like I got the offer, and like it was nothing but excitement. And I think that's just super cool because that's what you put the work in for planning and getting your brand out there so that people will begin to know that I'm exiting with a 4-year degree in computer science. I gotta hit the hackathons, the hiring hackathons. There's the obvious ones. Code for Good that's at the top of the list. So a marketing first at the beginning stage is really crucial for that, I bet.
Absolutely. I think it's funny that you mentioned Reddit too, because I stalk our Reddit, like what people post on Reddit about us all the time. I'm always so interested. But it's always great to see, again, to your point, the grassroots effort of like just participants sharing out that information has been fantastic. And then obviously this is not the way to get the most amount of people, but crazily enough, another way we end up getting people is by giving out that Code for Good merchandise, like company merchandise that they then wear back on their campus. And then people ask them about it. And we've had so many people tell us, like, I found out about this by like a Reddit thread, or because like a friend of mine was wearing a Code for Good shirt in class and now I know what Code for Good is. So smaller efforts, but I do agree, Patrick, that kind of putting in the work to scale early on will make a difference kind of down the road.
Totally. Hey, swag works. I very, very rarely is there too much leftover swag after a hackathon that we throw, for sure. So I'd actually like to jump into something that you touched on a little bit earlier, which is that kind of going virtual slash preparing for the hybrid approach. For those who are watching, actually a little bit of context here, Morgan and I, BeMyApp and JP Morgan and Chase and Co. started working right at the brink of COVID. And so, as with any sort of event or corporate or developer event organizer, there was a scramble to figure out, okay, how are we going to translate all the success from the in-person events and that connection and bring it online, because we just can't just drop the hackathon if we know we could at least try to do it digitally. So what was that experience like? What were some of the learning curves, and how do you feel about going back to in-person or the possibility of a hybrid?
Yeah, that's a huge question because
Sure.
you mentioned the scramble was real. I always tell this story. We were actually on our way to run like a 200-person hackathon. I live in New York, and I was on a flight to Texas about to run a hackathon early in March when the United States kind of got wind that we were going to have to start shutting things down, and it was crazy to have to kind of shut that down and pivot really quickly. Obviously, we weren't able to do it in a matter of days at that time, because at the time running a virtual hackathon was like not even something we were considering. But we quickly realized within a couple of weeks or months that we would need to try a virtual model to continue our programming, not knowing how long it was not going to be safe for people to gather in these large spaces from all over. So obviously, as Patrick mentioned, we started working together really at the beginning of the pandemic to switch to this virtual model, and it's really been fantastic. I think going into it, we had just had to do some research on how virtual hackathons work and what people were looking for and wanting. We did a lot of surveying to see what was going to make sense. We've also had to take into consideration, like globally, what does this mean for different people around the world and what they're looking for. So we noticed, obviously, as even in-person hackathons, we do cater a little bit to our different global population and what the people are wanting. And I think the same is true about virtual hackathons. Every place has a different culture. Not everyone wants to be on Zoom for 24 hours. Some people want to be on Zoom for longer than 24 hours. So just kind of really thinking about what that audience for each hackathon is going to be and what their experience is going to be like virtually, and kind of catering a little bit more to what that population is going to want has been a huge learning curve. Like I can give an example. We work really closely with our technology teams and recruiting teams in Argentina, who I've heard from, like, people in Argentina are not going to stay on Zoom for 24 hours. They don't have the culture where they stay on Zoom for 24 hours. The internet is a little different, in certain places, and not the same connection that you would see maybe in other countries. So really kind of thinking of what's going to give them the most positive experience, and do we take pauses throughout the hackathon and really be there maybe more to offer a little bit more support, versus places like India, where hackathon culture is really strong, and they actually start running these hackathons over a couple of days because it's virtual. People don't need to take that time away from work or family or anything like that. So they do have the opportunity to work on projects a little bit longer. So that's been one huge lesson learned, is it's not a one size fits all model. You really do have to think about the population that you're running the hackathon for, and how to just at the end of the day give them the best experience overall. But overall, running the virtual hackathons has been great. I think everyone's a little anxious to get back to in person, because I do think there is some value on having something in person. I think people are what we call a little like Zoom fatigued, just a little sick of watching people over videos. But in terms of just like off the bat, throughout the pandemic, when it hasn't been safe to be in person, having people have a great experience, having people connecting, providing value for nonprofits, and still identifying talent, we haven't seen a drop off in the success rate of that doing this virtually. So there's no, other than people like wanting free food in person, there's not a ton of drop off that we have noticed in terms of like our success in running the events. I do think in the future, and looking at getting back to in person, it is something we're obviously considering and really looking forward to. But to Patrick's point around doing hybrid models, I think the main lesson learned here is that we'll always, moving forward, offer some type of hybrid model, or offer some sort of virtual option, depending on, again, what region or what place we're in, or the time of the year, or what it may be. I think what we've all learned through this is just to be a little bit more flexible. And we've seen some serious like pros of having, of doing this virtually, and having kind of a platform like this where we keep it all in one place. So again, whether it's a hybrid event where we are, we bring some people who are comfortable being back in person, and some people who maybe aren't so comfortable, we have the tools and resources to have them still connect in different ways. Also, just kind of thinking about the different populations, just because we end up doing something in person in one region or for one population might not make sense for every region or population. So another example is like for campus recruiting, again, that early career talent of software engineers in college, it's a little easier for them, or for the most part, some of them, to take off a weekend and come fly to a hackathon and be in person. But thinking of some more of that experienced talent who are working full-time jobs and potentially have families, and they're a little bit later on in their careers, it might not be as reasonable for them to drop everything and come travel to a place. And then obviously there's exceptions within that as well. Like no matter what population you're in, everybody has their personal preferences and personal differences, where whether it's for medical reasons or just personal preference, whatever it might be, an in-person hackathon might not be the right experience for them. And being able to offer some type of hybrid experience throughout really forever, I guess, is going to be probably a better overall experience. So we're really looking at what a hybrid model would be, or again, whether in each event, or a hybrid model overall for our program, where we offer different types of things throughout the year.
Awesome. Yeah, this is all great to hear and totally tracks. Yeah, I like that point about flexibility too, because going back to that Reddit thread, one of the funnier responses was like an upvoted response to the thread of somebody who was like, should I join this? Anybody done it before? Tell me what to expect. And somebody was like, really regretting I didn't go to the one in Tampa, dot, dot, dot. So now for doing a hybrid, they might not get the exact same experience on site, but they are able to feel like they're able to participate and get what they want out of it if they can't physically be there for some reason. I see a great question here talking about attendees and engagement. Pascal asks so, what does the post attendee or post event attendee engagement look like? Do you have any post hackathon, follow up or engagement advice there?
Yeah, that's a great question. And honestly, we're always looking for advice in that field as well. So if anybody like has ideas, I think it's hard. It's easy for the people who join JP Morgan, right? So post event, we are looking at talent throughout the event. And to be honest, depending on the hiring needs, there's not a certain ratio we look for. It's not like 50% of people get offers and 50% don't. It really just depends on how many people are there and the hiring needs of that location. So for people who join JP Morgan, it's really easy to keep them engaged post event, because it's like, great, you came, you were hired through Code for Good, you like this program. Here's all of our other Tech for Social Good programs that we do, and here's all these other cool things at the firm, and we can give you updates on how we're working with the nonprofit. We continue to work with these nonprofits post hackathon, so we can give information about that. I think what's a little harder for us is people who, for whatever reasons, either aren't, selected to join JP Morgan at that time or choose not to. And how do you kind of stay engaged and talking with them in kind of more of an authentic way that doesn't seem very like corporate brandy is where we struggle just a little bit. We want to make sure that we're giving people information that they're interested in without having to send like newsletters out and for more emails for people to read, etc. So we do just try to continue, again, for the people who join the firm, we have lots of ways to share information about where we've gone with those nonprofits and what we're doing. From there, obviously, we also post highly on social media. We tell everyone to follow, like whether it's on LinkedIn or Facebook, like hashtag Code for Good, so that people can continue to see where the program's going and the different types of things we're working with. And then obviously, if they want to engage back with us, we're happy to answer any questions. But as of right now, I think between like newsletter, emails, social media for external people is the best way we've kept people engaged. Again, internally, we have lots of internal ways to keep people in the know about what's going on, whether it's articles put out about what we're doing at Code for Good or just having like internal network meetings overall.
Awesome. Yeah, that's all great. And when it comes to, the engagement and the ROI, we have a slide up here that just shows the amount of effort and return from that effort that you guys have put in. Like you said, almost 10 years, 90 events is a crazy average. Almost 10, that average is almost 10 a year. I know a lot of that is scaled most recently, but and 30 to 40% conversion, for yearly entry level demand recruitment. Also, the thing to call out is it seems like you're working sometimes with multiple NPOs in one hack, given that number compared to the hackathons organized. So it seems like you really are scaling and you've got a good formula for what ROI you want out of these events.
Absolutely. Everything you just said, Patrick. We've hit 90 events. We are about to hit our 100th, is planned for next year. So we're really excited about that. We're going to get some like funky headbands or hats or something to wear because we're always really excited about that. The 30 to 40% too, I can talk a little bit more on. Again, that's our conversion to some of the entry level talent, both interns and full time. So in terms of that number's a little hard to kind of picture, but I think in terms of the scale of JP Morgan, it best represents how much we've kind of contributed to the overall talent pool. So that 30-40% is the overall demand globally of how many people they're looking to bring into the firm each year for entry-level talent positions. Code for Good provides 30 to 40% of those people. So in any given region, 30 to 40% of the new people joining that year have come through a Code for Good hackathon. And then also, yes, nonprofits. We work with multiple per year. To your point, we've more recently started to scale up. So it went from like a couple a year to now, I think this year alone we did close to 15, which has been a little crazy, but
Wow,
we've scaled, and we're always obviously hoping to engage more nonprofits in everything we work with and do.
that's awesome. Also, swag idea for the 10-year anniversary. Technically, 10-year anniversary is the aluminum or tin year, so perfect tumbler. We're talking cocktail shakers, maybe. I don't know. Just thinking
That's
of
no,
swag
that's
anniversary ideas.
we're always looking for cool swag and cool swag ideas, so I'm always happy to have that.
Awesome. Well, yeah, this has really been great to cover the end to end from planning to return on investment. This has been really insightful. Um, I would love to cut to questions. I see the Q&A tab has been pretty active, so thanks to everybody for putting in questions. But we would love to answer any other questions from attendees about hackathons or recruitment or outreach, driving awareness. So feel free, folks, to drop it in that Q&A tab up at the top of the chat if you have any questions. And I'll just give a moment there. I do want to mention as well, like I said, we focused more on JP Morgan, Chase & Co. for this one, just because our other guest, Camille, will be joining us on a second follow-up webinar. But it's actually been great because Morgan and I have had so much to talk about. I don't know how we were going to fit it into one. So this has been perfect. I'm not seeing any other questions coming through the chat. I'll give it another minute, but Morgan, I don't know if you had any final thoughts on developer events and recruitment and just hackathon experiences currently. What's on your plate now, or what's in the future?
Yeah, I mean, just kind of a couple closing, I guess, things to keep in mind would be that overall hackathons have been for us a really great experience. So if anybody is thinking about doing it, I'd absolutely recommend it. It's been really, really awesome. And I do know just from going to, being talking with people from other large organizations and going to conferences, that this is kind of on the forefront of that like recruiting talent space, that people are thinking more about how to bring people in, not just in technology, actually, really across the board. And how do you have some more of this like experiential interview type situations to want to attract people to kind of a cool thing, but also to really get to evaluate what they would be like working at your company. So not just an interview or like a yes no type questions or an online coding assessment, but really getting to see how they like operate in every kind of aspect of that has been really awesome. So if anyone's considering it, it's been a really great experience. And then I guess the other kind of thing I would say too is it's not, the hackathons are not just for people, internally wanting to run them. There are lots of great hackathons happening in the external space that offer like sponsorship opportunities or opportunities for other organizations or recruiting teams to get involved. So if you're not like at the time, in your organization, that you'd be able to scale and build one of these hackathons, because I won't lie, it does, it is a lot of work to do. There's also a ton of opportunities for you to go sponsor a hackathon and be part of the hackathon space, the technology space in other ways.
Yeah, that's a great piece of advice for both resource and cost, and just planning hours sharing. Is if you have a partner network or even a customer network that you're very close to as an organization, you could definitely share the challenge load, the mentorship load across other teams who are looking to create networking and hiring opportunities. That's a great piece of advice. We actually do have another question here. Alicia asks, which roles successfully recruited from Tech for Good program go into? Oh, I think she's asking more specifically, can you give some example of roles or different kind of job paths that have come up recently as you're seeing people kind of grow in through the company from Code for Good and Tech for Good?
Yeah, so it's kind of hard to give like a definitive answer, just because of the way JP Morgan does things is a little different. Because we operate at such a large scale and size, it's not often like a one-to-one model. Like we watched you at Code for Good, and now we know you're really good with UX and UI, and so you're definitely going to a UX UI role. With some more of that entry level talent, we do ask people to keep it more broad, because we have so many different roles opening up every year that once they do accept our offer and want to join JP Morgan, at that point is when again, not our team, but the recruiting team and that program management team starts to place candidates and place full-time people in different roles. So it's kind of hard to say like what exact roles they're great going into. I think the idea for these hackathons is to, if we think of it more as like a talent pipeline. So we're not trying to bring in people like with the idea like we know exactly what role they would be great at, but it's more kind of just broadly helping brand JP Morgan as a technology company and bringing in some really great developers who just in general like to code and would bring something cool to the organization. From there, once we identify that talent, we know like we want these people to work here. And that is the point after the hackathon where, somebody works to say, all right, now what role would this person like? We should have them meet with some hiring managers. We should have them, see what types of things they're interested in and what locations that would be an option for. So it's kind of hard again to say like, we don't bring people in with that like one-to-one match. We bring people in kind of more broadly as like a sourcing pipeline opportunity. But obviously from there, I mean, we've had really successful developers go into all sorts of roles in different locations at JP Morgan, whether it be, a highly, highly technical role where, they're working on some new upcoming technologies, or maybe they're going to, they're still kind of getting their groundwork in with some of the like older technologies that are really safe and secure for a bank like us to be working in. We have people meeting with, again, like some of the design teams because they're really passionate about design and that's going to be a better fit for them. Cybersecurity, I'm just kind of naming like the high level lines of businesses we have. But again, there's not one specific role. We just like to bring in technologists who are passionate about coding and then can transfer those skills to different places at the firm.
Awesome. So people are applying to belong to a culture rather than applying to just one job. I think that's a really innovative way to look at hiring. Cool. Right on. Well, I think we've run through all of our slides. We've gotten through some great questions from participants, and we're coming to time right on the dot. So I'd like to thank you, Morgan, so much for taking time out of your busy day to talk hackathons with us. Always a pleasure seeing you, and I hope to see you again soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Patrick. Thank you so much for having me. It's been great talking with everyone about hackathons overall.
Likewise, and thank you everybody for joining and watching. Keep your eye on your inbox for an invitation to our follow-up part 2, where we talk to Camille from Sogeti and her set of hackathons for HR and recruiting. We're really looking forward to it. And once again, thanks for joining. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.